Welcome, Laura. So Laura is doing our talk tonight. Laura is a registered nutritional therapist from the UK. Laura has Meniere's disease herself, so she's in a really great position to understand the difficulties and complexities of Meniere's and how it affects us, which is really important, I think, for all of us. Doing her own research, Laura has a focus area on autoimmune disease, Meniere's as an autoimmune disease, and also using your diet to help with that, and also to help, for example, with anti-inflammatory processes in the body and helping you to control symptoms in that way. So I would now like to warmly welcome Laura to give us her presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I'm Laura, and yes, as the introduction went, so I'm a registered nutritional therapist. I'm working in the UK, and I do have Ménière's. I've had it for about 6 years now. I'm also a mum of 2, and I use diet and lifestyle to help manage my Ménière's. And having got to a place with that, a successful place with that, I decided that I just had to change my practice so that I worked specifically with Ménière's clients. So yes, I run like an online practice where I use nutritional therapy and functional medicine to help manage people's symptoms better internationally. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to talk about my Ménière story, and I'll talk about how I manage my own condition, and then how I approach things with the clients that I work with. And so I'm going to talk a bit about inflammatory triggers and inflammation, and how that's like the main driver for Ménière's, if you like. And I've got some questions that Anne also sent over that I think a few of you have contributed. So I'm going to try and answer those at the end as well, because some great questions. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end for some questions. So if you want to just put things into the chat box, then I can answer things at the end. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? That's it, that's the one, yeah. So I worked in advertising for 14 years before I became a nutritional therapist. Really long hours, really stressful, lots of pitching in London, but I loved it. And then I became a mum, and so that was really quite hectic. And at the same time, I was also training to be a nutritional therapist in my spare time. So as you can imagine, life was pretty stressful. And then my partner suffered a major bank fraud, and it was at that point that my ear just started to fill up. And I mean, I didn't know it was Ménière's at that time, but eventually that's what it became. Yes, slide 4, please. Yeah, that's the one, great. So this all happened around age 36. So as I said, I started to get fullness in the ear and tinnitus, which lasted about 6 months, by getting a fullness in the ear and the tinnitus that I'm sure you all know so well. And then one day, I'd been out with a friend, I'd had some red wine and some crisps, some salty crisps, very little water, and I had this really, really violent attack and ended up in hospital. And I didn't have any idea what it was, and I just ignored it. And then a few months later, I fell pregnant, and actually then I was completely fine. The whole time I was pregnant, absolutely fine. The ear was clear, but it was a few months postpartum, about 3 or 4 months postpartum, that I started to have attacks again. My ear started to fill up. I see this a lot with clients, actually, this sort of pattern with people who've had babies. And after, I mean, it probably took a few years until I was diagnosed with Ménière's. But I had like a jet engine in my left ear, really, really loud tinnitus. I was deaf on the left side. I was having attacks maybe every few days, lasting maybe a couple of hours, sometimes 8 hours, being sick, you know, really violent, with vertigo. And I also felt very anxious and very depressed and down, no energy at all, and a lot of sort of brain fog. And I couldn't work, I couldn't drive. I was scared to look after my daughter. So I had like a little baby at the time, and it was really quite a terrifying time for me. And this went on for a year or so. And meanwhile, I was still studying in nutrition. And so, yes, I started researching. So could I get the next slide, please? Slide 5. Great. So now, after some time, I am Méniere's free, but it's very much managed. This is not a cure. You know, I manage my symptoms. I'm constantly sort of keeping an eye on things, and I know what my triggers are and what my weaknesses are. And it took several years to get to this place, working on my health, working on my diet, and understanding what my triggers are. I don't take any medication for Méniere's anymore. And so now I've done so much research. I know so much about it, and I'm still learning, but I'm sort of on a mission to tell as many people that there's more that can be done. It's not just about taking the medication and cutting salt. There's a lot more that you can do to help manage your symptoms better. Okay, slide 6, please. Okay, so I was trained in functional medicine on my nutritional therapy course. And the aim of functional medicine is to find root cause. So it's very much sort of winding things back and trying to understand what sits behind the disease. It's 100% research-based, and it's a very personal approach. So when my Meniere's began, I hadn't qualified at that time. I was still studying. And so I just started using the functional medicine training that I'd got and started doing the research to try and understand Meniere's better and if there was anything more that I could do. The doctors had told me, just take this medication, that's it, you've got it for the rest of your life, just going to have to put up with it. And I just refused to accept that, I suppose. I just thought there must be more, there must be a reason why I have this thing. Slide 7, please. So this is what I found out. In layman's terms, it's a bit more complex than this, but in layman's terms, Meniere's is triggered by inflammation. And lots of things trigger that inflammation. So it's not one single trigger, you know, there's not one solution. And that's why pinpointing a single trigger or a single cause for Meniere's is impossible, really. That's why nobody has managed to develop a single medication that can solve it. That's why we're all just told to manage it and just to sort of put up with it. It's not that easy. There's lots of inflammatory triggers, and they're all unique to us, if you like, and personal to us. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. So the work I do with clients is very personalised, trying to understand their own triggers. Slide 8, please. So what I try to do with myself and what I do with clients is trying to understand the root cause of the inflammation, establish what's driving the condition, and that's how you can help manage symptoms better. So there's many triggers of inflammation, as I was saying, but there's one very, very big one, which is where nutritional therapy comes in. So slide 8, please. Slide 9, rather. Yeah, so the Western diet. The Western diet is full of inflammatory foods. There was a question about processed food from Anne. So predominantly it's processed and pre-packaged foods that are very inflammatory. And the rise in chronic inflammatory conditions and autoimmunity, it's linked with the consumption or the rise in consumption of processed foods in all the literature. So what happens when food is processed is that the nutritious fiber in the veg and the healthy fats and all the nutrients and all the things that your body needs to thrive as opposed to survive, all of these healthy things are removed and they're replaced with sugar and cheap sugar, salt, gluten, and artificial ingredients. All of these things can be inflammatory for people. So that's why processed foods can be quite inflammatory. Okay, slide 10, please. Great, so these are the top 3 inflammatory foods. There's more, but these are the things that I look at a lot with clients. So gluten, dairy, and sugar. And quite often they're staples of the Western diet. Quite often the things that people are told are healthy, those specific things like milk and bread and pasta, and they can be inflammatory for some people. Slide 11, please. Great. So inflammation can be triggered by many, many things. So these are some of the areas that I would look at with clients. It isn't just food. Obviously, diet is a massive part of that. After diet, it's chronic stress. That is just, I see that with absolutely everybody that I work with, that there's been a period of stress that's happened before the Ménières has began. And so I'm looking at chronic stress. Sleep, poor sleep is associated with Ménières. That's very inflammatory. It's very stressful on the body. Sometimes some medications can be inflammatory. Some antibiotics can affect the microbiome, PPI sometimes. So digestive imbalances, I don't want to get too technical on this, but microbial imbalances, things like Candida and SIBO, just poor gut health in general can make a difference. So lifestyle, being sedentary, having a high BMI, these things can be inflammatory as well. Also, there can be sometimes underlying infections that can trigger the immune response, and that is in a sense inflammation. So things like herpes, pneumonia, things like that. Having had that in the past, sometimes those things can sit latent in the body and can be stimulating the immune system to react and cause inflammation. And toxins, so pesticides, additives, sometimes mercury fillings, mold. There's a whole range of things that I will consider when I'm working with a client. So slide 12, please. So these are my triggers. So through my research and my testing, I identified some main triggers for me. So certainly chronic stress was a factor for me. Working in the advertising industry, the fraud, the juggle with children. I was a terrible sleeper. So for me, managing stress was one of the first things I tried to do. I had really bad digestion, wind and bloating for years, diarrhea, and that's partly why I ended up doing nutrition, started to train in nutrition, because something wasn't right there. And I identified some food intolerances. For me, that's specifically gluten and cow's dairy. So I needed to work on that. I had some infections, I think potentially some Candida, and some nutrient deficiencies, which I established through testing. So I was very, very anxious and depressed, had very, very low energy, and chronic stress can deplete the B vitamins in particular. So I'm very deficient in B6 and zinc at the time. And these nutrients are essential for the immune system, and deficiencies can also be linked to tinnitus and vertigo specifically. And I see deficiencies in the Bs all the time with the clients that I work with, but it's not something that you can sort of guess at. You do need to test. Another random thing that I realized later is that actually the moldy flat that we were living in London, I think that was underlying some of the inflammation as well. I don't think it was the key driver, but it wasn't helping. So mold can trigger inflammation and trigger the immune system. So managing my own condition, I've changed my diet to manage the intolerances, and I've started meditating and improved my sleep. And in the end, I decided I needed to leave advertising, that it just wasn't suiting me, just to try and manage my stress a bit better. So I changed my diet quite a lot. I stopped eating sort of fast food, a lot more veggies, a lot more water, just a bit kinder to myself, a bit less sugar, to try and improve the gut and my food intolerances. And eventually we moved house. We were renting in a not very nice rental. We ended up moving out of London, and got away from the mold and the stress of that. And then I took some supplements for a bit, and I still take the odd supplement now and then. But I mean, this took a while. You know, it took a while for the Ménières to establish itself. It took a while to sort of rewind it. I would say it took a couple of weeks or months for like the tinnitus to start to improve, and the sort of severity of the attacks to start to improve, and more like a year or so before I started to sort of forget that I had Ménières, if you like. I mean, I'm always monitoring it, but it took a while, and it was very, very gradual. The brain fog started to lift, my energy started to improve, I just started to feel happier myself. The tinnitus got better gradually with hearing. It was quite a gradual process as I sort of worked on things. So slide 13, please. Oh, so how I help clients, actually slide 14, that's just the title. So yes, I go through exactly the same process with them. I'm trying to identify those inflammatory triggers. And it's not about removing all inflammatory triggers. You know, we're just trying to remove the things that we can change. Some things we can't change. So I like to think about it like a bucket. So we have a bucket, we can only hold so much inflammation. And when it gets too full and it starts to overflow, that's when potentially disease can manifest. And that process takes a long time. So if we can just do some things to gradually reduce the amount of inflammation in the bucket so that it isn't overflowing, then we can start to potentially and hopefully manage our condition a bit better. So what I do with my clients is we'll look at what happened in the years leading up to their Ménières. Was there something really stressful that happened? Did they get pregnant? Did they potentially, you know, that can lead to nutrient deficiencies? You know, what's been happening in their journey that's got them there? And we'll review their diet and their lifestyle and all of their symptoms. So I'm not just looking at Ménière's symptoms, I'd look at their digestion to try and get some clues there. I'd look for any toxins, you know, I'd be trying to cover off all those areas. I'd be looking at stress levels and lifestyle and relationships and mood and really just trying to get a full picture of what's happening so that we can work out what top inflammatory triggers are for them and what are the easy things that we can try and change. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, you know, because stress is so prevalent in Ménière's. The work I'm doing is not trying to stress you out. We're just trying to agree one little change each time we meet that can work with your lifestyle, and it's not going to completely like railroad life. It has to work with your life, or else it's not going to work. And sometimes I might do nutritional testing as well. If I'm looking for nutrient deficiencies, if I suspect they might be a factor, or if I suspect there's something going on in the gut, then we might test there as well. And actually, I do work with companies that have offices in Australia and America and around the world. So I do functional testing with international clients as well that they do at home. Slide 15, please. So this is something I'll ask all of my clients to do, pretty much, and it's something you can do yourself. I'll ask them to keep a food and symptom diary. And this is just, it's gold to try and work out what some of those inflammatory triggers are, specifically in the diet. You can also make a note of your sleep and your stress and your hydration and even the weather, or if you've got your period. All of these things can be triggers and can give us information on what's happening. And this is what I did for myself. I started experimenting on myself and looked for patterns, looked at which foods are triggering problems, which is it when I eat something really sugary, is it when I haven't eaten, is it when I'm having lots of gluten, you know, just trying to over time build up a pattern, build up a picture of what's going on. And often I'll ask people to rate their symptoms, so rate their tinnitus, rate their attacks, rate those main symptoms. Digestive symptoms as well can give us a real clue. If you're getting wind, if you're getting bloating, if you're getting tummy pain, those sorts of things can help give us clues as to what's happening in the gut, or if you're reacting to foods. And generally I say it's like a 3-day window. You don't always react with Ménière straight away. With blood sugar, you might do, it might be within an hour or so, but with gluten or intolerances, it can take maybe 3 days or so. And so we'll look at a client's diary over a few weeks, few months, and actually you can sometimes pinpoint things and we'll say, right, just try removing that for a couple of weeks and we'll see if that makes a difference. And actually this is one of the key things, is that I try and teach people that it's about listening to your body. With Ménière's, I like to think that Ménière's it's like your body is talking to you. Like a lot of conditions, they're silent. And yeah, the tinnitus and the attacks are like really irritating, but actually it's your body's way of communicating with you. It's your body's way of telling you that what you're doing is not working. And equally, it's your body's way of telling you when it is working. So the tinnitus and the attacks and the fullness, they are clues, and that's what I want you to start to listen to and take notice of. So to manage your condition, it's really about listening to your body. And then when we start to make changes, then actually you can see, oh, the tinnitus is coming down. or actually it was raging after I did that. What was going on there? And actually this is how you help to manage symptoms better. This is the personalized approach, because everybody's different. What triggers your tinnitus is not necessarily the same as mine. Obviously there's patterns. Obviously there's things that I see that come up regularly with clients, but it's really about empowering you to listen to your own body and actually try and solve it yourself a lot of the time. Yeah, I'm telling you what some of the obvious things are, but yeah, it's about listening to your body as much as possible. Okay, so if we go to number 17, this is where I've got some of Anne's questions. Okay, so packaged foods. Oh, number 17. Yeah, so you were asking about packaged foods. And I did touch on this briefly before. Anything made in a factory is potentially inflammatory. You know, you can't trust a manufacturer with your health, really. Like, they only care about profits. They don't really care about making you healthy. So generally packaged foods can be inflammatory. So the best thing to do if you're going to eat something packaged is to choose something with 5 ingredients or less. And look at the ingredients list. Are they ingredients that you've heard of? Or is it strange, weird additives, like something strange that's been made in a lab? You know, you want ingredients that you would have at home. Oh, something's happening, I'm not sure what.
Oh, is that your...
And yes, so look at the ingredients list. Has it got gluten in? Has it got salt in, of course? Has it got sugar in? Or are they just ingredients that you would have at home? Ideally, though, you want to choose foods that I don't have any ingredients lists at all. So whole foods, things like broccoli. But obviously, we all live in the real world. You know, I'm talking about doing that sort of 80% of the time if you can. So slide 18, please. Yeah, so this is the key point. This is what I want you to understand today, that the whole foods diet is anti-inflammatory. So the definition of a whole food, that's something that hasn't got an ingredients list. It's fish, it's cod, it's meat, it's vegetables, it's broccoli, it's fruit, nuts and seeds and pulses. As much as possible, it's cooking from scratch. So I'm not expecting people to do that all the time, but if it's more like 80% of the time, then that could be fantastic. So a whole foods diet it's naturally anti-inflammatory, and it's naturally low in salt. So it takes out a lot of that worry about counting sodium. And so these are foods that aren't made in a factory, you know, they're grown in the ground or they're reared on the earth. And ideally, as much as possible, it's organic or grass-fed or wild, or, you know, it's the best quality you can afford, essentially, because the best quality is going to be less inflammatory, if you like. Okay, 19, please, slide 19. Okay, salt. So I get this all the time. I'm always asked questions about salt. It is a really huge topic. I'm actually currently writing an ebook on it at the moment because there's just so much to it. So I'll just top line sort of talk about some of the main things. So slide 20. Yeah. Okay, so salt restriction works by stabilizing the endolymph fluid, which is believed to be the main cause of Ménière's. And it's the sodium chloride in salt that has been linked with inflammation as well. But I feel like, you know, looking at that slide previously, that salt is not the main driver of the inflammation behind Ménière's, or it's certainly not the only driver. There's a lot going on. Slide 21, please. Yeah. So I find generally with clients, low salt diet works fantastically in the short term. Like it's really is the best thing to do when you first get Ménière's. But then a lot of clients come to me because they're finding it really stressful and really restrictive, and it's affecting their quality of life. And you know, they can't feel like they can't eat out in restaurants, and it can feel like being on a diet long term. And I guess there's a few things that worry me with that is stressful in itself. When stress is one of the main drivers of Ménière's, then I feel like doing something that is going to make your life stressful is not that helpful. And also I feel like, I feel like it can be quite stressful. And I suppose the other thing is that it doesn't solve root cause. Low salt doesn't solve root cause, so it's not going to solve your problem long term. It's management day to day. So a low salt diet, it's not solving the root cause, and it's not stopping all the inflammation. It's not going to reduce inflammation enough for the symptoms to stop. And also salt's essential for health. So sodium chloride regulates water in our body, and it's really important for cell-to-cell communication and muscle and nerve contraction. So actually having a very low salt diet can be very dangerous. I mean, definitely a high salt diet is dangerous too, but a low salt diet can be quite dangerous. Certainly people who exercise a lot, and athletes, should not be on a low salt diet. If you've got low blood pressure, potentially not. And if you've got chronic stress, then that depletes salt as well. So, I mean, I'm certainly not expecting people to add salt into their diet, but you just need to be aware that in some cases, say if you're getting lots of cramps or craving salt, this is often something I'll work with clients with, because potentially they might need some more salt in their diet. Okay, number 22, please. So, right, this is another big point. So processed food accounts for 75% of salt intake. So if you cut processed food and eat a whole foods diet, you don't need to worry about salt. In fact, you might even need to add it in. So I actually do add salt to my food now. I didn't in the beginning when I first got it, but I've got to such a stage now where, I mean, I actually need to add salt, and it's doesn't trigger symptoms for me at all. But that, it's a journey to get to that place. Slide 23. So yes, I mean, I've made this point already, but the whole foods diet is naturally low sodium. It's naturally low salt. In my opinion, it would make way more sense if the guidelines were more about cutting processed food rather than vilifying salt. I think everybody would be a lot healthier that way. And generally with clients, my approach long-term for people is to help them stop counting sodium and get them onto a whole foods diet about 80% of the time. So once inflammation is reduced a bit and symptoms start to get a bit better, then I will start to add salt back into clients' diets, unrefined salt, so like Himalayan salt or rock salt or something like that. But that takes time to get to that place. And it certainly needs to be done with a professional. I'm not expecting you all to go out and start adding salt to your food, because that is just not going to help. And yeah, we're all unique. Right, this is the thing, it's personalized approach. We all have different needs for our salt. People who exercise more or live in hot countries or are more stressed are going to need a bit more salt. People on like a keto diet or whole foods diet are going to need more salt. You actually excrete more salt on a low carb or a keto diet, because that's just the nature of the diet. So you actually need to add more in. So we're all unique. We all have unique needs for salt. And so a sort of one size fits all approach to salt is not necessarily going to benefit. It's not going to benefit everybody at all. So slide 24, please. Okay. Oh, there was a great question from one of you lot about the different forms of sodium and whether they should be avoided as well. So things like sodium bicarbonate in baking powder and sodium ascorbate in vitamin C. And lots of my clients, sorry, I've got a phone call. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
I've lost the slides. Okay, I'm just going to do it off here. Okay, so where was I? Sorry about that. Different forms of sodium. Yeah, so there's really conflicting advice about this. Like, that's why it's such a good question. So the research says non-chloride forms of salt don't affect blood pressure. So they should be fine. But then there's other studies that say things like sodium bicarbonate should be limited. So my advice is to listen to your body. We're all different. Do your symptoms change after you've eaten some sodium baking powder? Do you feel worse? Does your tinnitus go up? Do you have an attack? in which case avoid it or use it in moderation. Work out the level for you. You know your body best. You know what those triggers are for you. I don't think there's one size fits all. This is where your food diary comes in. You know, if you have some vitamin C, you make a note of it. Do you feel worse the next day, or do you feel all right? And then you can decide whether that's something that's safe for you or not. Okay, slide 23, please. Okay, so, oh yes, this is a good question. Adding flavor without salt. So there's lots of ways to do that. Obviously fresh herbs and spices, you know, basil, parsley, coriander, rosemary, all of those things, great way to add flavor without salt. Spices, garlic, chili, paprika, all of that sort of stuff. Then no salt and sugar condiments. Look for paleo products. Actually, paleo products are really good. They only use whole foods. They're not overly processed. They don't contain any sugar or salt or gluten. So you can get sort of avocado mayonnaise, paleo mayonnaise, things like that. And then obviously cooking styles, you know, roasting vegetables before you make soup is going to make it taste so much more delicious. Steaming vegetables and adding olive oil and garlic and fresh herbs and lemon and things like that will add flavor. Roasting broccoli with olive oil and say some dried coriander, it's completely delicious. You don't need any salt. Really get into cooking. That's what I'm trying to urge a lot of my clients to do. Learn to cook, get cookery books out, enjoy being in the kitchen, get the radio on, get on some recipe blogs, and really just enjoy cooking. That is the way to reduce inflammation in your diet, is to enjoy cooking. I think that's really important. Slide 26, please. So, oh yes, so I've just put some recipe blogs here for you just to get you inspired. I love Ottolenghi. I love his books. I love all of his recipes on his website. He just makes vegetables taste amazing. You know, vegetables that you wouldn't even normally eat. He'll just do incredible things with them. So check him out. I like Helmsy and Helmsy have some great recipes. Deliciously Ella, Amelia Freer, Alana's Pantry, and Nom Nom Paleo. There's some great places to try just to start doing some nice cooking that's low salt, low sugar, low gluten, all those sorts of things. Oh, and then I had a question about low salt bread, because obviously lots of you are avoiding salt. So slide 27, please. So this is a yogurt flatbread that I give to a lot of my clients. So it's 150 grams of self-raising flour. I would be using gluten-free flour because that's a big inflammatory trigger for a lot of people. And then 125 grams of yogurt. You can use any yogurt you like a Greek yogurt, a coconut yogurt, an organic soya or cashew or goats. Generally with a lot of my clients, I'd get them to use a dairy-free version. You combine the ingredients in a bowl, then you knead it, you divide it into 4 balls, and then you flatten them down, and then you just fry them for a minute on each side in a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and that makes a delicious flatbread for, like, you can use it as a pizza, you know, base for pizza, or like to make a little sandwich or something. That's really nice. And then slide 28, please. So this is a tahini loaf. So I haven't put the full recipe here because it's quite complex, but there's a link there. And this, it uses tahini butter. And there's a tiny bit of salt in the recipe, but you can leave that out, or you can, you know, put in as much as you feel comfortable with. This recipe is also gluten-free and it's also dairy-free. Because that's what I'm giving to a lot of my clients. And obviously when you're cooking from scratch, you can determine how much salt goes in that food. You know, it's not being determined by somebody else. You can decide how much is right for you. Okay, slide 29, please. Okay, sugar. So this was a question from Anne, or from one of you guys. And in my opinion, sugar is more of an issue than salt, really. And it's something I'll work on with a lot of my clients. Slide 30, please. So what is sugar? So it's one of the most inflammatory foods we can eat. It's 8 times more addictive than cocaine, and changes in blood sugar have been shown to be associated with attacks in Ménière's, and with changes with hearing loss in Ménière's in the research. And so when I'm talking about sugar, obviously I'm talking about the white stuff, but I'm also talking about refined carbohydrates. So things like bread and pasta, all these things are converted to sugar in the body. So it's not about like completely avoiding those things. It's just about perhaps having them slightly smaller part on your plate and pairing them with protein. I mean, I'm getting off on too much advice here, but yeah, it's about perhaps reducing those a little bit. It only takes a slice of wholemeal bread to spike sugar, blood sugar, even more than a Snickers bar. So it's not about eliminating, it's about cutting it down a little bit, and perhaps more sugary things like chocolate bars and things like that. It's gradually reducing them and not having them as much. Slide 31, please. So modern packaged bread, yogurt, fruit juice, cooked meats, ready meals, all these things, they all contain sugar. So this is why cooking from scratch is so brilliant, because you just avoid that. So read the ingredients list as much as you possibly can, because sugar, just check if sugar's there. Modern bread will have loads of sugar, whereas traditional bread or perhaps bread from a more traditional bakery will be lower in sugar. Slide 32, please. So I'm not going to read these out, but there's 61 different names for sugar that manufacturers use to disguise sugar in their products. So I used to work in advertising, so I know all the tricks. Sugar's really cheap and it's really addictive, so it makes you eat more. And it's a cheap way to make their product taste good. So yeah, these brands, that don't trust them to cook you dinner. They care about their profits. They don't care about your health. Look up the 61 names for sugar and just check products to see if there's sugar in there. And actually, the higher up the ingredients list that is, the greater, the more there is in that product. So if there's sugar if you're comparing two products, say, if there's sugar in both, you want it to be further down the ingredients list, because that means there'll be less. Slide 33, please. Okay. I mean, I'm getting a bit into biochemistry, but just very quickly, I talk a lot to my clients about the blood sugar roller coaster. So when we eat sugary foods or refined carbs, we get a rush of sugar into the bloodstream where it goes up, and then we get it crashing down again. And every time we get a spike, we get inflammation, potentially linked with an attack. So that's when you start to feel things coming on or ears filling up. And then when we get a crash, we get hunger and shakiness. We feel tired, we get sweet cravings. And that's when we've got to have another chocolate bar. We just got to. We have another one, and then we're back on that roller coaster again. And it's like a vicious cycle that can happen throughout the day. Slide 34, please. So when we eat a balanced diet with lots of whole foods, lots of veg full of fiber, lots of healthy fats and healthy proteins, we get a much more gradual rise and fall in blood sugar. We don't get inflammation. We don't get that intense, oh my God, I've got to eat a Mars bar feeling. We don't feel tired in the afternoon after lunch. We don't need to eat as often, and it's just much easier to actually eat a healthier diet. We won't be craving sugar as much. And in time, this can start to improve your Ménières. This is something that I'll work on with a lot of clients. Slide 35, please. Oh gosh, we're running out of time. So some signs that you might have problems with blood sugar. So attacks first thing in the morning, or attacks after eating something very carby or very sweet, or a meal that hasn't got protein in, because protein can help balance out the blood sugar spikes. That can be a sign that you have got a problem with blood sugar. Craving sweet and carby foods, like particularly in the afternoon, you can have a bit of a slump and just really need something sweet. Having acne and spots. PMS can be a sign that there's a problem with blood sugar, because all of the hormones work together, and the blood sugar impacts the sex hormones. Headaches and migraines can be a sign of blood sugar issues as well. And carrying your fat around the middle. Excess sugar is converted to tummy fat. So that can be a sign that sugar might be a factor for you as well. Slide 36, please. Oh, God, sorry. My phone's ringing. No. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Slide 36. Oh, hydration. So In the East, for Ménières, they don't restrict salt, they add water. So it kind of has the same effect on the body. And dehydration has been linked with fullness in the ear and Ménière's symptoms in the research. And I'll look for patterns in clients. You know, they'll have attacks after they've been on a long walk and it was hot and they didn't have enough water, or they'll have attacks after they've had alcohol. It's not necessarily the alcohol, it's the fact that the alcohol's dehydrated them and they haven't had enough water with that alcohol. So dehydration can be a factor for people. And so I will certainly, where relevant, I'll be getting people to increase their water and make sure it's filtered, good quality water. Slide 37, please. And then that leads me on to alcohol. So I'm certainly not against alcohol. If there's a dehydration issue, I'd be making sure that you're drinking enough water. I think, you know, 1 or 2 glasses occasionally is absolutely fine. Obviously, drinking a bottle of wine every night is not going to help. And I ask people to match wine with water, you know, so you're having a glass with a glass of water so that you're really keeping on top of your hydration. I think the other thing with alcohol is that stress management is so important in Ménières. And if for you going to see your mate and having a little glass and a chat, you know, that's gold. That is going to keep you from feeling stressed. So I try not to take alcohol away from people if I can help it. Obviously, if it's more of a crutch and it's something you're doing that's a bit unhealthy, that you're sort of using to survive or to cope, then that's less healthy, and that's something that we would work on. But certainly the odd glass of wine with a friend is, as long as you're having water with it, absolutely fine. Slide 38. Oh, and I suppose I should say as well, it's about listening to your body again. You know, the guidelines do say to cut alcohol, and for some people it makes a big difference. Keeping the food diary. What happens when you had the wine? Do you feel okay if you have 1 glass? Do you feel terrible if you have 4? You know, it's really just about listening to your own body and looking for those signs. It'll tell you what it needs. It'll tell you what it wants. So yeah, slide 38. So caffeine. Of course, caffeine also dehydrates the body. So it can be a factor. Caffeine also increases the stress hormones, so it can make us feel more stressed, and it can affect sleep and circadian rhythm. So I'd be looking at how people are sleeping. I'd be looking at how much caffeine they're having. I'd be looking at what time they're having it. I might get some people to reduce it or avoid it completely, but it's really a case-by-case basis. And certainly I'd be getting people to do it gradually. It's really addictive, caffeine. If you want to start cutting it down, cut down to like half a cup a day. Do it very, very gradually, because you don't want to get sort of withdrawal headaches. It's no fun. And there was a question about chocolate as well, because obviously chocolate has caffeine. Generally, I get people to have dark chocolate as much as possible. 70% dark if you can. There's hardly any sugar in there. It won't affect your blood sugar, and it can boost beneficial bacteria in the gut, which is where the 80% of the immune system is. So it's really great in that sense. And just you only need a couple of squares of dark chocolate to get like a massive chocolate hit. You don't need to eat 4 bars of milk chocolate. You know, you can actually get that hit, that taste hit, in a much better way for your body. Okay, slide 39. So vitamins. So I was asked about recommendations for vitamins. Obviously, diet's way more important than vitamins. You know, making sure you're getting good quality proteins and healthy fats and fruit and vegetables and all of those sorts of things. That is the most important thing. Supplements, it's definitely a personalized approach that I take. As I said before, I might be testing for a lot of people, particularly around the B vitamins, and particularly with people who are very stressed. I would always be testing. But there are a few vitamins or nutrients that I recommend for quite a lot of clients. Slide 40. So generally, I would recommend a really good probiotic, really good quality probiotic. So the microbiome in the gut, it primes the immune system, and dysbiosis and leaky gut, they're associated with Ménières. I don't want to get too much into the biochemistry and confuse you, but the gut and the microbiome and gut bacteria is a part of Ménières for sure. And there's lots of research around that. So I would often recommend a probiotic. But there's exceptions. I wouldn't recommend it if I thought somebody might have SIBO. That's a completely different conversation. It's too big a topic for today, but that is something that I see a lot in clients with Ménière's because it disrupts the immune system. It's one of those gut imbalances that I was talking about. I would also recommend fish oil or omega-3 for a lot of people, pretty much everybody, because it's anti-inflammatory. Generally, the Western diet is inflammatory because we have an imbalance of omega-6 and omega-3. So I would put some good quality fish oil into most people's diets for sure. Or certainly having oily fish, eating oily fish at least 3 times a day. That's a good way to try and get some healthy fats. And then vitamin D. A lot of people I would be giving vitamin D, particularly in the UK, because we get no sun. It's linked, well, deficiencies are linked with immune dysregulation and with Ménière's. But generally, it's probably good to get your levels checked and get your levels checked regularly before you start supplementing. Find out quite how deficient you are, because it's about having the balance. You don't want to have too much vitamin D either. Okay, slide 41. Right, that's actually everything. I would love to offer anybody who's interested a free 20-minute Zoom call with me just to chat a bit more about how I work and about you and see if there's any other advice that I can give you or if you've got any other questions. That's my email there, so you can just drop me an email if you'd like to do that. Also, if you go on my website, I have a newsletter and I have an ebook, a free ebook that you can download, so you can follow me as well. And then I'm also on Instagram, so that you can follow me on there. I post recipes, I post tips and things like that. Oh, and then slide 42, please. That's the end of me. If anybody's got any questions, let's talk about it.
Myself, sorry.
That's okay.
Laura, thank you very much. That was a really great talk, very informative. I certainly learnt a lot from just the different things you were talking about, and also I think having a total approach to it and also working things out bit by bit, like step by step, sort of not trying to fix everything straight away, but working on it consistently.
Totally. Yeah, you don't want to feel overwhelmed. I mean, there's a lot going on, but actually sometimes it takes, I'll change one thing with somebody and that was it. We cut the caffeine and then they feel much better, or we cut the gluten and they feel much better, or we cut the chocolate bars that they're constantly having and they feel much better. You know, you want to change as little as possible, really.
So we might move on to some questions that people are asking. So someone has asked, can you use potassium to replace sodium?
So I presume that means for the taste. Yes, I suppose if you were trying to go low sodium, yes, you could. It's not something I've got clients to do or that I know much about, to be honest. I suppose as much as possible, I'd be saying it's more about cooking and using herbs and spices and all of those sorts of things, rather than using potassium, because potentially you end up with another imbalance because you're adding that in. Yeah, potentially.
Okay. So after that, now with dairy, because I have yogurt regularly for breakfast, and I am a real yogurt eater. So I guess the advice would be to try lactose free. Is that in terms of dairy?
React to lactose. Yeah, you can react to lactose and you can react to casein. So
right,
lactose free doesn't necessarily solve it. I'm not against homemade yogurt. I'm not, if a lot of people tolerate cow's milk absolutely fine. So I'm not against it. It's only when it presents itself with a client where there's certain things that you would look for that suggest that it might be a dairy intolerance. So yeah, absolutely, homemade cultured yogurt is going to be fantastic for the microbiome. Look, keep a food diary. Are you reacting? Do you get really windy after that? Does it hurt your tummy? Does it give you diarrhea or constipation? Is it a problem for you? Potentially you could make your yogurt with goat's milk or with sheep milk instead. That's less inflammatory. That might be another option. But yes, certainly cultured yogurts are a good thing for the microbiome for sure.
Oh, great. Okay. The next question concerns diabetes. So if it's not high in salt, it's high in sugar. If you have diabetes and you have Meniere's, your food choices are hugely diminished. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I suppose this is my other problem with the low salt guidelines, is that people rush out and buy foods that are labeled low salt, but they're still just processed packaged foods. And exactly that, they end up being higher in sugar, they end up being higher in additives and lots of other rubbish because it tastes terrible without the salt. So I would be saying whole foods diet, which I've been talking about. I think there is a lot of research around the links between blood sugar and diabetes and Meniere's, and I would think in that particular case, you would be focusing more on sugar than on salt, reducing sugar more than salt. I test a lot of my clients' glucose levels and work with their GPs and things on that as well. So yeah, somebody with diabetes, I would 100% be focusing on sugar and trying to get whole foods in. And actually, the more you do that, that's going to help the diabetes as well. A lot of what I do, because it's a whole body approach, we're looking at everything that's going on. A lot of other things will start to improve just as a happy accident, because diabetes and blood sugar is related to Meniere's and inflammation. You can't sort of help one without helping another, if you like. So managing the diabetes would actually be part of the protocol in a sense, because that is potentially driving the Meniere's
as well. Okay. The next question concerns turmeric or curcumin. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly. I normally just call it turmeric, but that is a biggish thing here in Australia. Yeah. We have had it in the media. It's supposed to be quite a powerful anti-inflammatory if you take it in high enough doses. And of course, people can use it in cooking. So what are your thoughts about using that as a supplement?
I mean, usually I will try and get people to cook with it as much as possible. So I have a smoothie, like a turmeric smoothie or a turmeric latte that I recommend often. Lots of curries and things like that. All great herbs. I mean, most herbs and spices are, in fact, all herbs and spices are anti-inflammatory. So yes, I don't often recommend it as a supplement because I think you can use it in food so easily. But yes, there's a lot of research to suggest that that's anti-inflammatory. Yeah, that's a good thing to use as much as possible.
Okay, wonderful. The next one is in regards to honey. So I guess you put up the 61 different types of sugar and honey was included in that. So the question is, does honey have the same impact on our blood sugar levels as refined sugar?
Sure. And it will have of course, it will affect blood sugar, it's sweet. But I will recommend to clients to move from refined sugar to maple syrup, honey as much as possible. I will be saying, a little bit, it's about gradually reducing that. And then your taste buds change. When you're not eating processed foods all the time, actually blueberries start to taste very sweet. Things start to, broccoli tastes sweet. Things like that start to taste sweeter and you don't need the sweetness as much. So yes, I will get people to cook and bake with honey and maple syrup more. It's much better. I think the link I put up about Alana's pantry, she does loads of baking with honey and maple syrup. That's definitely a better, and coconut sugar actually is another one that people use. That they will have a slightly better impact, slightly better, but they are going to spike blood sugar a little bit.
Right. So interestingly, I've never heard of monk fruit before, but someone has asked, what about monk fruit? Does it create an inflammatory reaction too?
I don't know anything about monk fruit. And that's probably because I live in the UK and I've never come across it. I don't know. I have no idea.
Right.
But I imagine if it's a fruit, probably not. So the thing is with a fruit, well, fruits and vegetables, yes, they have got a little bit of sugar in them, but they come with fiber, and fiber slows down blood sugar spikes, it's evening things out. It's hard to digest. So in that time when it's digested, it's only very gradually released into the blood, so you don't get a blood sugar spike. Therefore, you're going to have less inflammation. So I imagine if it's just a fruit that has a little bit of sugar in, then I think that'd be much better. Fruit and vegetables, that's the way to end your meal, is with some berries, maybe with some yogurt or some seeds or some nuts or something like that. That's like the best sweet pudding. Or a piece of dark chocolate.
Right. Okay. So got a couple of questions in regards to salt. So one of them is, what is the lower limit for salt you recommend with a whole food diet? Yeah.
See, I don't recommend specific limits for people. I'm against counting sodium, because I think it puts you in this sort of diet headspace and it makes it very stressful, life very stressful. I'd prefer you to focus on just eating whole foods, and then I think in time, as symptoms improve, trusting your taste. And actually, if you feel like you need a little bit of salt in your food, quite often that will guide how much salt you need. In time, that's not something that you can do straight away. So I'm not really, I wouldn't like to say a specific number, because as I said in the presentation, everybody's different. You might be running, you might be, you might be suffering cramps, you might be, sweating a lot, you might be really stressed, you might have low blood pressure, you might have diabetes. There's an impact with diabetes and salt as well, that you actually potentially need more salt. So there's loads of things that you have to take into consideration when I'm working with clients in terms of how much salt they need. And so I wouldn't like to put a number on it, really.
So, okay, so that sort of ties into the next question, which is about how much salt would you recommend as a guideline each day in milligrams?
I think, well, listen to your body. That's what I would say. Follow the guidelines, the traditional guidelines, and do what they say, and see how you feel. Do you have cramps in your legs and arms? That can be a sign you need a bit more salt. Do you crave salt? Are you just desperately wanting some crisps or something? That can be a sign you need some salt. How much salt are you having in your diet? Are you eating lots of processed foods, in which case you don't need any salt? Or are you eating lots of fruit and veg and lots of whole foods? And then you can trust your cravings a bit more. So I wouldn't like to, beyond that, just to stick with the actual guidelines, the government guidelines that you get. And if that works for you, great. But I wouldn't really give specific milligrams for people, because it's so personalized.
That's right. Okay. Also, just Selene has said that your presentation has been fabulous, but have you been able to convince conventional medicos that this approach is well worth considering in concerns in regard to like controlling your Ménière symptoms?
It's a good question. No, I've sort of given up on that front, to be honest. My ENT is like, no, food doesn't make a difference. Like, okay, doesn't want to hear it. Some people are more open-minded, certainly when I work with, actually in the US, and sometimes clients that I've worked with in Australia, they just tend to have more open-minded doctors. It depends really, but I'm not going to fight that battle. I can't fight that battle. I sort of gave up that because I was going nowhere with that route. I mean, and I've done talks where people have just completely poo-pooed everything. So I just want to get my message out there, because there is things that you can do, and it makes me very cross when people try to suggest that there's not more you can do. It's about empowering people, rather than just giving up. You can actually feel better, and it's you can do it. So no, I haven't really.
Oh,
good question. No.
Yes.
I think that might be the last question.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much, Laura. You've been wonderful to have speaking to us today, and you've told us lots of really interesting things, and it's plenty of sorry about the pun, but food for thought for all of us.
You're very welcome. I love talking to you. And if anybody wants to drop me an email if they've got any other questions, then I can happily email back. Or if anybody, like I say, wants to chat a bit more, then just let me know, because I just want to really try and help as many people as I can.
Yeah.
Laura, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. I know I've learned a lot, and And as Jenny said, food for thought. So
Well-
thank you very, very much. I'm sure you'll hear from many of us very soon. Okay, really
Great.
appreciate your time.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you all. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you. Good night, everybody. Good night.
See you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.